And welcome. Good to see you all. I am excited about this machine. This is the North American debut of this model, so you're all seeing it here for the first time. The MWR series, like Daniel said, is a twin spindle front-facing parallel spindle lathe with tremendous milling capability and y-axis. The brand new MWR is a 6 to 8 inch chucker. It has two spindles with 50 horsepower and 6,000 RPM. It's got a 10 station turret on both sides. All the stations are live, obviously capable of milling as well. It has a directly coupled milling motor, which is really important to better transfer power of the spindle motor to the tooltip, and 8,000 RPM capacity. For off-center work, we have plus or minus 60 millimeters of y-axis travel. So that's 4.8 inches now of y-axis travel achievable in this package. In case you didn't know, like all Miratech products, is built with reliability by design. So productivity is what we do, and that's because sometimes you just need to make more parts. Just as all MW series machines, like I said, it's a front-facing twin spindle model. It's a chucker lathe, meaning that we cannot support a part with the tailstock. So this is for shorter slug parts. But let's start with the gantry because automation is our theme. As you look throughout the Murata booth, you can see gantry loaders and automation throughout. Gantries and automated loading is in our DNA, meaning that Murata starts the design of the machine with automation at its core. Do not have this as an afterthought. This is part of our DNA because sometimes you just need to make more parts. The MWR boasts our brand new gantry, which is the fastest in the industry. So with the carbon fiber reinforced y-axis beam, a lighter x-axis carriage, we're able to achieve 9,400 inches a minute in X, 6,900 inches a minute in Y travel, making loading and unloading as fast as possible while still maintaining 6 kilograms per hand capacity on the loader. That's over 13 pounds of part in jaws that you can move at that speed. Now you say that's fast, but that's not the only thing we made fast on the machine. So on top of that, we decreased the cycle time it takes to open and close the shutters. Sorry. So our gantry shutters open and close faster than our previous models. On top of that, we reduce the cycle time for opening and closing the chuck so that we can get parts in and out faster. Our spindle lack and deck time has been reduced from our standard models, as well as the turret indexing time. All of this to make the non-cutting time minimized as much as possible. All that because sometimes you just need to make more parts. Now let's talk about the advantages of parallel loading as opposed to bar feeding. The inherent advantage of this is processing speed. And because of, first we're going to talk about floor space. So the parallel spindle machine like this is much smaller in floor space than a machine with a bar feed. And nowadays, people are using square footage used by their equipment as part of their ROI investment justifications. Space does equal money, and we have a small footprint machine with the same capacity as something with some type of automated bar loading system. Another thing is part capacity. So on a machine with a bar feeder, you're going to be limited to auto loading parts that are equal to the spindle diameter. So either the bar feed is a limitation or your spindle bore capacity is a limitation. On our largest model shown here is 3 inches. On this machine, we can go up to 120 millimeters or 4.8 inches. And not only that, because we're using our gantry loader for big parts, we can get odd-shaped parts like castings, forgings, maybe parts that came from a previous process for stamping that are not necessarily round. So we're not limited by holding a round bar and not limited by the spindle. Our limitation is the gantry capacity and maybe the chuck size. Imagine if you wanted to try to feed a 4.8-inch bar through a spindle. That would be a large lathe. So again, that goes down to the fact of floor space. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Daniel, and he is going to talk about our MT200, and then we will get back into discussion of slugging.
Thank you, Gabe. So, to expand a little bit more on the MT200, sitting here behind me, the MT200 is an opposing twin spindle lathe, where a spindle here would be 3,500 RPM, an 828 spindle, 20 horsepower, 80 millimeters of bar capacity, so we're looking at about a little over 3 inches of bar capacity. The right spindle is going to be a little smaller. It's 4,000 RPM, so it's a little faster. 826 spindle nose with 15 horsepower. So on the MT200, we have a built-in parts unloader to remove the completed parts, so that is how we're able to automatically unload parts here. We're able to use the integrated parts unloader to remove the parts once we're completed. So there's our automation at work. Then we have you can get the machine also with 2 or 3 turrets, where with this style machine over here, you are limited to 2. Here we have the option to go up to 3. So that is a distinct difference between the two models of machines. If you need more tool stations, this is the direction you would go to look for more tool capacity. So this machine does have 2 turrets, and the upper turret would be 15 tool stations. So again, we're getting more tool capability with this machine if you're looking at some of the differences. They're all driven. We can go up to 6,000 RPM. Here we're 8,000, here we're 6,000. Upper turret would have plus or minus 40 millimeters of stroke, so a little less stroke over here compared to here, a little over 3 inches. The lower turret is 12 stations, a little smaller, and that turret can have half index, so we can get up to 24 stations for a turret here. Again, another advantage of getting more tools, more tuning capability. They're also 6,000 RPMs with plus or minus 40 millimeters, a little over 3 inches of action travel on the lower turret as well. So all MT machines are standard with thermal sensors to give us the accuracy we need to produce very accurate parts. And all machines are also available with a gantry loader as well. So we don't have that here. We have it behind you over there. We are able to put gantry loaders on the MT series machine for parts that maybe do not fit this particular application of bar feeding. It also has 3 turrets if you want to see that model over there. So again, just want to remember, because sometimes you just need to make more parts. So what are some of the other advantages of bar loading a machine like the MT200? So if you have parts that are longer, where Gabe was talking about, if you have short parts, maybe do not need a tip stock, or you don't have length issues, in this machine, if you're doing longer parts, mine would be a better solution for you. So if your parts have a length to diameter ratio that is uncommonly long, the MT machine again might be a better solution for you. So then also another distinct difference, if you have an extremely out of balance op-10, op-20 first cycle, first side versus the second cycle, this particular setup might be a little more advantageous for you to allow you to tweak those cycle times a little bit better. And then also, again, getting back to the multiple turrets, the multiple stations, if you're doing a lot of jobs that are close and you need that changeover and you need the ability to have more tools for changing them to commonality of parts, this here would be a good solution for you. So So now I'm going to turn it back over to Gabe, and he's going to.
Distinct machines, they're both capable of turning parts very effectively. And don't forget, Murata means more. We can do it faster, better. But I'm going to talk about the distinct advantage of this over bar feeding in some cases. For example, part shape and size. We talked a little bit about size, where you're limited to spindle bore, but also part shape. So if you have a forging, a casting, a part that's pre-machined, doesn't matter, the gantry with the right set of tooling can pick that part up. So you're not limited to round parts. The slug loading advantage is more flexible because we can go from part to part without having to change liners, bar feed channels, and things like that. And also we gain capacity because our capacity on this machine compared to that larger lathe is about 1.5 inches larger. Another thing that a lot of people don't count on is a long and risky process of doing the transfer and cutoff. For example, if you're done machining a part in one spindle, you have to pick it off with the other spindle, cut it off to present another part and go home. So all that process is time that's being wasted in a lathe that a saw can be doing. While you're doing that process, you're not really making a part. You're simply removing the part from one spindle, you're putting it on the other spindle, and you're taking it off the end of the bar. You've not really made a part, and that cycle can cost you anywhere from 20 to 45 seconds, depends on exotic material, a lot more. A saw does that perfectly well within the cycle of the lathe. It doesn't have to be done with. On top of that, the cutoff process is very risky. That's one of the worst tools to have in your turret setup, especially with exotic materials, stainlesses and that. I know there's a lot of tooling vendors here that do it differently, but that is about the worst tool, gives you the most headaches. Floor space savings we already talked about, but another point in case is if you have a saw feeding a machine like this slug loading, and you add another machine to the mix, you don't have to add another bar feeder. One saw has the capacity to feed several Durotech machines, as many as 8 to 10 if you get the right saw. And that's bar feeders that you're not repeating with oil and chains and alignments and channels and spindle liners. Other limitations of bar feeding are the maximum allowed RPM. When you're turning a whole bar and it's a 12-foot bar and it's not straight, and I don't know who gets straight bar anymore, you're limiting the RPM because you get vibrations. All those things affect more things than just the RPM of the machine. Surface finish, tool life is all affected by long bars and vibrate. Max part weight. So when you get to these larger diameters on heavier materials, it's very hard to push a 3-inch bar that's 12 foot long. So bar feeders have their limitations as well with capacity. And we talked about part quality. If you have bar whipping, you're going to affect your surface finish, and that's going to make you normally slow down the process. With just giving up, compromising the capability of the machine to make a part because of inherent bar issue. Another thing is spindle utilization. If you're doing this transfer process, it's cutting off, your brand new CNC with a very expensive bar feeder has become nothing more than an expensive saw. The saw is a very inexpensive piece of equipment to buy for a shop, and it does that job more effectively, and part per cut is very cheap on a saw compared to a lathe with a bar feeder and a cutoff lathe. I'm going to do this. Yeah. So, again, some of the other conclusion advantages, we talked about efficiency of the spindles, making parts not cutting off or transferring, lowering cost of the cutoff blade, inserts versus cutoff saws. One saw can feed several lathes, and there's only also one part to handle 12-foot bars. If you have a shop with many bar feeders, you have to move that equipment, these long bars. It's ergonomically hard. It's not really good conducive for traffic in the shop. No more bar end prepping. Another thing is remnant. So a lathe with a bar feeder will give you a longer remnant than a saw will. And if you're using these shorter servo bar loaders, where you're taking a 12-footer and you're cutting it into 4 sections, you have now 4 remnants to deal with. That's a lot of parts that you rather sell as a finished part than a piece of wasted material. Anyway, in conclusion, I want to thank you guys for the time that you've given us. We want you guys to take a closer look at these two machines. This is the North American debut. Take a good look at the MWR, please. Ask questions. Watch the demo run. We also would like you to please take time to attend our Premier talk across the aisle right here for the MS60 and the MW200. And join us if you come back tomorrow at lunch again for beer and some wings. But we thank you very much for your attention. Distinct machines, they're both capable of turning parts very effectively. I am excited about this machine. This is the North American debut of this model. We can do it faster. So you all seen it here for the first time. But I'm going to talk about the distinct advantage of this, like Daniel said, is a twist